Hello and welcome to another Beast PC Opinions video. One thing I've noticed after watching a lot of tech YouTube videos and reading articles and comments is that price is always mentioned and seems to be a very important aspect about PC building. In fact, I'd argue that most PC builders consider price above anything else in their PC. This got me thinking, are there any other hobbies that focus on price this much? Today we'll try to explain why price is so relevant and some things that we find misleading when it comes to price. Let's first try to explain why price is literally everywhere, why it's the first thing that pops into the consumer's mind when buying a PC. Reason number 1, there's deliberate market segmentation by the hardware companies in terms of price. For example, with AMD CPUs, you can buy CPUs for $50, $100, $150, $250, and so forth. And this is the same for other CPUs and GPUs as well. The only differentiation between all of these models is added performance. And of course, the companies want to extract the maximum amount of profit they can out of the consumers, so they'll push hard to sell their mid-range product. It has higher margins than the low-end product, and it's more accessible to more people than the high-end. This creates an interesting effect. The companies will make the mid-range product the most enticing, and importantly for this discussion, it'll create clearly defined price segments. So, when buying a product, the consumer must first know how much they're willing to spend. Then they can consider the product that they can afford. This seems to me quite different from any other hobby. Let's take cars as an example. A consumer will first have in mind what kind of car they want, like a sedan or SUV for example, what brand they like or what kind of features they want. Then they can choose something they can afford. Buying PCs seems to be the other way around. Price comes first and then product selection. Why is this? This brings us to the second reason. With a PC, what is noteworthy for review? What numbers can you objectively measure in the review of a product? There are only really two: benchmark points and price. Other numbers like power draw and gigahertz are largely the same between most CPUs with a few exceptions. So, when creating content for YouTube, what can the creators talk about with a product? It all just boils down to performance and price. Of course, there should be more to talk about. Building a PC is not just about two numbers, there's a story behind things, and there are often certain emotions to be felt. But for the average YouTube channel or review page, the creators are trying to get out as many videos as they can with a small team, and subjective things like emotions, aesthetics, convenience, and more are easily skipped over. This could be because subjective things are more difficult to express in a video. These content creators are not Disney. It's difficult to show emotion, especially in such a more numbers-focused field like PC building. So, most videos I've seen only touch upon two things, performance and price. And this ends up affecting the consumer who, because of the first reason, will consider price first and performance next and really nothing else when building a PC. Going back to the cars analogy, in a car review, it isn't just about price or acceleration times or top speeds. There are more things to consider, like interesting features, how it feels to drive, comfort, the aesthetics, stuff like that. Computers have less dimensions though, and the content creators only seem to tell about two of them. And the third reason why price is so relevant in building a PC is that, well, there are many things to consider. There are lots and lots of parts to buy, like a CPU, motherboard, GPU, cooler, RAM, storage, power supply, case, accessories, monitor. It's super easy to get overwhelmed. And so we need to organize everything. And what's the best way of organization? A budget. Sites like PC Part Picker make it very convenient to spec out your new PC build, but there at the bottom there's one big number, the price. Now, whenever you change out a product for a different one, that number at the bottom also changes. And of course, people will try to get the number to the lowest that they can get. So, prices become the most important thing again. Which leads me on to the next point of this video. Price doesn't have to be the first thing you focus on when building a PC. There's a popular yet misleading phrase used by too many people in my opinion called bang for buck. Of course, it makes sense that people want to get the most product for their dollar. They want to get the best. But how do you define the best? Is it the most performance in a benchmark you've never heard about and you'll never use? Is it the most available product? Is it the best looking? Let's look at the Ryzen 3 3100 for an example. It's commonly referred to as the best bang for buck CPU there is. But is it really the best product for your dollar if it's constantly out of stock due to its hype? Can a product really be called good if you can't even get it? And if you can get it, how much time did it take? Did you just click buy on Amazon and have it delivered 2 days later? Or did you have to pour in time and wait for it to go back in stock on some arbitrary date in the future, all to save $50 versus a CPU that's 50% better? There are many nuances like this that are skipped over when boiling everything down to just one ratio called bang for buck. So certain people like to use a more specific ratio, price to performance, but I'd like to argue that this is quite misleading as well. How do you define the best performance per dollar? Is it in multi-core, in which case the Ryzen 5 1600 AF easily takes the crown? Or is it single core, where the Athlon 3000G wins? Or is it in gigahertz, where the Core i3 9350KF wins? Or is it in best gaming performance for your dollar, where the 9100F wins? Or is the best performance a weighted combination between these that varies with each person? How can you proclaim that something is the best performer by testing it with benchmarks nobody ever uses and say this is the best for everyone? This is simply misleading on behalf of the content creators. Let's be honest. For pure gaming performance over price, for most gamers, the Core i3 9100F takes the crown. Yet I've never seen it recommended. The Ryzen 3 3100 costs 33% more, but it does not give 33% more FPS, so if you're a gamer, you're frankly being misled. They paint the illusion that more cores is better, and it's in those multi-core benchmarks that you've never heard of. But for pure gaming, the CPUs they recommend might not be the ideal choice, and similarly if you do anything else on your PC. So how do you choose a CPU instead? It's simple, really. Just consider what you do with your computer and buy the cheapest CPU that works for you. You don't have to buy into the mid-range sweet spot that everyone recommends. If you genuinely need extra cores, go ahead. If you can't afford the mid-range, the low end is still very competitive. You don't need to be pressured by everyone else to buy an arbitrarily defined best bang for buck CPU. After all, how many of us really play games with the FPS counter on? Just enjoy what you have while you have it. Use your computer for its intended purpose, to compute, not to compete in a price competition. That's all we have to rant about for today. If you like this video, please leave a like and please consider subscribing. See you next time.